Hey folks, Roger here. I hope you're doing well. So like most of my friends when I got out of the Marine Corps, I blew up like a balloon and got gloriously soft with all the fast food. Mainly because I was busy and because I was eating fast food and stopped working out. But I've cut out most of the fast food and I've starting to harden back up a bit. So I'm trying to fit into my old suits. So if it looks a little tight, it's because it's tight around the chest. You know, I'm working on it. Hey, I wanted to talk about Jim Carrey. So if you're like me and you grew up in the 90s, you know Jim Carrey.
Somebody stop me!
He has a very physical kind of humor, and I think most people either love it or they hate it.
This pen is...
For me as a kid in the 90s, of course I loved it. You know, it was just absolutely belly laugh hilarious. And those who are prone to more intellectual kinds of humor probably aren't a big fan of his, but you know, I was right time, right place. You know, when he became popular, I think 94, he blew up. And he had this twinkle in his eyes, and the guy was just on top of the world. He had a few movies that just hit all in a very short amount of time. And he was rich, he was famous, he was funny, he was well-liked, he was popular, and he sort of achieved everything that Hollywood sort of pitches and sells to the rest of the country that you should be. I've talked before about how I think Hollywood has been in some ways bad for America. And though I love cinema, I think that Hollywood's influence has been abused. And I think that the more we learn about the people who run that place, the more some of the disturbing, I think, immoral content that they push out sort of makes more sense. And I think over the decades, those people in Hollywood have certainly changed my generation's mind about a lot of things. And I don't think all of it's for the good, though some of it is. But what I wanted to talk about today is what happens when a man who buys the pitch that Hollywood sells him, and then he succeeds in Hollywood, but then that lifestyle that he thinks will satisfy him, if you just make enough money, if you're just famous enough, if you just have the cool cars, maybe all the women you want, if you're funny and well-loved, you'll be satisfied. What happens when a man like that gains the whole world and then feels that he loses his own soul? If you look at Jim Carrey's eyes over the years, sure, he still has the sparkle, but it's a weighted sparkle. His eyes are much deeper and darker than they used to be. So I'm really not here to preach to you, but I do want to examine this. As time has gone on, Jim Carrey has talked more and more about religion from multiple points of view.
I've always wondered about certain things, certain ideas surrounding Jesus.
And ultimately, I believe that suffering leads to salvation. And in fact, it's the only way that we have to somehow accept, not deny, but feel our suffering and feel our losses, and then we make one of two decisions. We either decide to go through the gate of resentment, which leads to vengeance, which leads to self-harm, which leads to harm to others, or we go through the gate of forgiveness, which leads to grace. And your being here is an indication that you've made that decision already. You've made the decision to walk through the gate of forgiveness to grace, just as Christ did on the cross. He suffered terribly, and he was broken by it to the point of doubt and a feeling of absolute abandonment, which all of you felt. And then there was a decision to be made. And the decision was to look upon the people who were causing that suffering, or the situation that was causing that suffering, with compassion and with forgiveness. And that's what opens the gates of heaven for all of us. So I wish that for all of you. I wish that for myself. I know that, no matter what I've suffered, most of you have suffered worse than that. But that's why I admire you, because you're here. And you will have grace because this decision has been made. So I'm so glad to be with you and to be a part of this. Thank you, Father Greg.
He's painted a picture of Christ. He's talked about Christ openly. But he's also, I think, explored Buddhism and sort of Eastern religions, non-Christian religions. I looked into this man's life, and it's clear that this man has suffered. And this is evident from just looking into his eyes, but this man has suffered loss. And I think contrary to sort of a pop culture Christianity that kind of wants to act like everything is SpongeBob and everything is good to go, there really is suffering into the world. It seems to me that as time has went on, Jim has struggled with the idea of his suffering, coupled with the idea that everything that he's achieved, everything that he's gotten, that it was supposed to make him satisfied and happy, really just has left him empty. So I'd like for you to listen to this. I'm going to play a longer clip of him giving a speech, and just listen to his words. He's joking, but he's not joking.
From the upcoming film True Crimes, please welcome two-time Golden Globe winner, Jim Carrey.
Thank you. I am two-time Golden Globe winner, Jim Carrey. You know, when I go to sleep at night, I'm not just a guy going to sleep. I'm two-time Golden Globe winner, Jim Carrey, going to get some well-needed shut-eye. And when I dream, I don't just dream any old dream. No, sir. I dream about being three-time Golden Globe winning actor Jim Carrey. Because then I would be enough. It would finally be true. And I could stop this terrible search for what I know ultimately won't fulfill me. But these are important, these awards. I don't want you to think that just because if you blew up our solar system alone, you wouldn't be able to find us or any of human history with the naked eye. But from our perspective, this is huge. One more time, here are the nominees for Best Motion Picture Comedy.
So once you achieve it all, the only thing you can do is wish for more. But at that point in his life, Jim knew that this wasn't going to do it either. I think this sadness and this depression that so many feel in our culture, that's becoming more and more widespread, this isolation, isn't really just madness. So some have said that Jim Carrey is crazy. I doubt that he is. I think that Jim Carrey is consistent.
The cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be.
So I think that, like many people, and like Jim has said, if all there is to humanity, if all there is to the cosmos is matter, and if everything is subjective, you know, we talked about this, Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, tried to protect the objective belief in beauty and the transcendent and values from those who were trying to subjectivize it centuries ago, knowing full well that to make everything subjective is a deep mistake. But if everything is subjective, and if everything that you do as a human ultimately doesn't matter, whether you take a life or save a life, whether you give to charity or use your hands to, whether you use your hands to hand bread to a homeless person or to murder someone, if everything that you do in your life means nothing in the end, I don't find this motivating, I find this demotivating. And I think this is an extremely widespread view that people hold. If not only everything that you do, but everything that your family does, everything that our entire species does, will one day be wiped out, our species will go extinct, and every life that has been saved, every child that's ever held a teddy bear ultimately means nothing, and none of it matters, then I think the correct, proper view is to face this depression head on. Now, I found that most people who believe this or feel this way don't actually live this way. They still try to love the people that they love and make life better for people, maybe give to charity. I still try to be kind at the grocery store, because ultimately, even the people who feel that nothing matters in the end still can't bring themselves to live this way. To me, this is a clue that something inside of us screams out that, you know, we do want justice, we want meaning, we want beauty, we want transcendent values. That doesn't mean that they exist, but I think something inside of us gives us this clue that our thinking about this might be incorrect. No, I don't agree with Mr. Carrey politically or ideologically, but I sort of choose to not see these people as enemies. I choose to see people as people until I have to choose to see them otherwise. So though I disagree with the man, you know, I used to think it was silly to pray for celebrities, because I think in my generation, celebrities are sort of these superhuman gods and goddesses that are not human. And then one day I realized, you know, these are just men and women. And I started praying for these people. So I actually pray for Jim Carrey. I pray for his soul. His life does remind me of not just Buddhism, but the teachings of Christ. Christ said, "What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" And here I think is the difference between Buddhism and Christianity in this regard, though there are points of connection. For those who don't know, I'm a convert to Catholicism, and I think that Catholicism has the fullness of truth, right? So the difference between these two belief systems would be that in Buddhism, ultimately there is no self as I understand it. So suffering might be the desire for something. The suffering comes from the desire for something external. But you can alleviate the suffering by realizing that none of this matters, and that there is no self, actually, which should desire something external to oneself. Now, perhaps I'm wrong. I don't think I am. But I think this actually, well, the good thing about this can be moral restraint. It can teach restraint and some sort of detachment from don't sweat the small stuff in life. If you take that through to conclusion, I don't think it actually addresses the problem of suffering sufficiently. The difference would be in Christianity, Christ, who said, "What shall it profit a man if he lose his own soul, though he gain the whole world?" This person actually took on the suffering in the world. And I do contrast this to some of these, you know, popular level Christianity, versions of Christianity. Christ, if this narrative is true, came into the world and faced all the evil and wicked things and pain and suffering that humanity could throw on him. And he suffered as us and with us and for us. And this is a rather different thing, I think, than to deny the suffering, to deny the self. It's to acknowledge the reality of suffering and that evil is a depravity and to face it head on. And then in this narrative, Christ gives us the grace to face that evil in our own lives. Now, to me, I find this motivating. I find that though, and I know from experience, I cannot always face the suffering in my life, the pain in my life, on my own. I can try to soldier on and man up and take it, but eventually I fail, and this is where grace comes in. I think that the tragedy of fame is not being famous. The tragedy of fame is thinking that fame will bring you joy. Clearly it won't. I used to think that all the famous movie stars of the past were sort of immortal. You know, they made it to cinema, they'd be forever known. You know, Charlton Heston, Audrey Hepburn, and those older stars. And I thought these people are in some way immortal, you know, they've made it. And then as time went on, I realized a lot of people my age don't know who these people are. The people who went to the theaters to watch them are dying off quickly. A lot of my generation don't know who they are. and the people coming after me certainly don't. So very soon, in very short order, these people will be known only by scholars and film buffs. No matter how famous one gets, you'll still be forgotten. Everything you've done will be forgotten by every living person. And even those people who did impact humanity in major ways, like Julius Caesar, they're not the center of the world. Most people who know Julius Caesar and what he did don't live their lives focused on Julius Caesar. They live their lives focused on themselves or the people that they care about and their own circumstances. But I do think that in Christianity, that our lives do matter and that what we do has some objective value. It's sort of like the movie Gladiator. What we do in life really does echo in eternity. I find this a much more hopeful view, and it reminds me of St. Augustine, who famously lived for pleasure and got himself mixed up in some non-Christian philosophies before coming fully into Catholicism. And he said that the pleasure let him down, and the philosophies that he explored were intellectually dissatisfying at some point. And ultimately, he found intellectual satisfaction in Christian theism. But it's more than that. He said famously, "The heart is restless until it finds its rest in thee," talking about God. I think this is not a one-time prayer, as evangelicals so often, well-meaning, sometimes leave a convert with this perception. I think that this is abiding in Christ, as Christ says. And for me as a Catholic, it's in the sacraments. But whatever position you take on this, I think it's fair to say that looking at a man like Jim Carrey, I don't think he's being inconsistent in this sadness or this depression, though he doesn't call it that. I think he's looking squarely at the world, his own life, the suffering in the world that he can't fix with all of his money, and he's facing it. But in my view, I do hope that he finds this heroic call of submission of the will to Christ and the grace offered therein, and one day he finds rest. To me, knowing that this is the way the world really works makes me think of the people I've lost, even those who've taken their own lives, of all the suffering in the world, of all the pain, and even all the beautiful moments that I spend with family members and friends, and think, no, it's all worth it. It all does matter in the end. To me, that's motivating, to finish the race, to fight the good fight. But what do you think? So I enjoy reading conversations, most of them. If you do comment, I appreciate it if you be charitable to each other. Liking, commenting does help the channel so that YouTube knows people are interested in this content. If you find it interesting, or, what I'm trying to do is have conversations worth having about things worth talking about in an honest way, contrary to so much what I see on YouTube. If you find that interesting, liking, commenting, sharing with a friend, that all helps. I don't like self-promotion, but YouTube works the way YouTube works, right? It is what it is. Hey, but whoever you are, wherever you are right now, I hope you know that your life matters. Someone somewhere loves you very much. Dark times pass, so I hope you're taking care of yourself. Hey, very much as always, I appreciate you watching. Take care. God bless.